Okay, so we're going to have a hopefully a nice dialogue now with Hamza, as opposed to what you've just seen. So I'm sure this is going to go a lot better. Come this side, my friend.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I did warn you.
Yeah, apologies for that.
No
I
worries,
really
man.
didn't want to get into
No,
that.
that's all good, man.
Yeah. So I just managed, fortunately, Rob kidnapped me from the all of the fire going on.
The
down
previous
there.
video that was on here, which is with Godwin and Hamza, I did say to Hamza, good luck speaking to Godwin because he interrupts totally. You don't get a chance to speak. I've had one conversation with him. I said, probably never again because you just don't get a chance to dialogue. So hopefully we'll get a better chance to have a dialogue now.
I'd like to thank Rob first and foremost. His erudition is extremely remarkable. It allows for good conversation. Forgive me if I had said anything you had seen on the video that may have been offensive to Christians. It was not my intention. It's just a low level of conversation that transpired from speaking to the gentleman. I won't mention his name. So forgive me for that. It's only in retaliation that I spoke as I did. Just on the, since we're talking here, just on the last conversation we had, we spoke about creation and certain models.
Yes.
We spoke about the steady state model, we spoke about the inflation model and everything. There's one thing I had wanted to ask you, if you may.
Go for it.
One of this is that generally people who are religious are continuously accused of being biased in the examination of the evidence. They tend to often go towards science and material that is biased for them. My question is, Rob, do you not see how you may have been guilty of that last week? I'll give you an example of what I mean. Last week we showed you the dominant model in cosmology. It was the inflation model or the singularity, the Big Bang theory. But in order to kind of get away from the concept that there may have been a creator who caused this singularity, you mentioned other models, but these other models, they don't have a dominant following in the community. So why is it that you think, if with a bit of introspection, that you follow it? Do you think it's an atheistic bias?
Okay, so the reason I bring up other models is to counter, the only claim I'm countering is when you say it must be something or it's impossible. That's the only reason, my apologies, it's the only reason I bring up other models. The other models don't go against general relativity or physics. So unless we can rule those models out, we can't make absolute statements. That's the only reason I bring those in, because some people, not yourself necessarily, but other people come and say, hey, it's impossible for an actual infinite to exist, or the universe can't be infinite, it can't create itself. That's the only reason I bring those models up. And my biggest point is we've got to be careful. What we really should be saying, both of us, is we're agnostic on the origins of the universe. But what I do notice is that some Muslims want to co-opt science when it appears to go with what their book says, and then they will let it go halfway through, because any of the models we use, if we use the inflationary model, that the inflationary model predicts a multiverse. Now Muslims will go, hang on a moment, the multiverse is not an option, it's speculative, etc. But remember, we're going with the model. Either we've got to follow the model through, or we've got to stop halfway. And if we stop halfway, why do we stop halfway if we are using that model?
So I think this is where, in the last discussion, I made clear that I think I have a high confidence. Even in the Islamic point of view, we say Iman goes up and down, meaning that sometimes we have this doubt that enters into us. We can never have 100% confidence of anything. Likewise, you taking the next step, there's not 100% confidence that you may not fall into it and end up in some next dimension. But you know, out of your confidence, there's a high probability that won't happen.
Correct.
So likewise, when it comes to the singularity model, we understand that we can have high confidence in this. Thus, we can follow through the belief that there may be a creator, as we discussed, who is timeless, immaterial, and so on, as we discussed in our last discussion. So why then would you go to something which is less probable?
No, so remember what I said is the only reason I'm using the other models. I agree that the inflationary model seems to suggest that the evidence seems to point in that direction. We're not sure 100% one way or the other. But the other thing I want to speak to you about, so the only reason I'm talking about the other models is to counter the claim that it says it must be this or it's impossible to say that. That's the only reason I bring those in. But the other thing that I wanted to speak to you about was the singularity. Okay, so the singularity theory is not something that most cosmologists go with today. So what they do go with is, if you wind the clock back, you get to a point where the universe is infinitely dense, infinitely hot, infinite pressure, etc. That's not the same as a singularity. So we've got to be careful not to use the wrong word. So really, we're agnostic. We don't know what happened. Here's our best suggestion currently, but we don't know for sure one way or the other. There's not enough evidence to go, this is as good as, for example, evolution. So it's not at that level yet. Yep.
But in the absence of certainty, we still have to make certain assumptions. You do not know the ground and underneath you is going to be solid for the next step you take.
Yes.
But you still make the assumption it is so you can make the next step and get to your journey.
Yep.
Can you understand how theists operate in their life? That they may not have all of the answers, but in the absence of certain things, they have to make assumptions. In the future, for example, we can explicate the mechanism of how a Ford car works, but that does not do away with Henry Ford, the creator of the Ford car. So we as a theist believe that there is a creator, as we explained in the last video. We believe there's a creator who caused this movement or the Big Bang, and who is outside nature, so he is thus by name supernatural, a supernatural creator, infinite, who gave laws because the universe runs on laws. That law must have come from somewhere, a lawgiver. So these were all of the qualities. You mentioned, I think you were a bit reluctant to give this a name. You mentioned that you believe in other models,
so
quantum physics, but can you understand from the Muslims' point of view that we have, this is not necessarily that we're looking at science and then coming to the conclusion. It may be that we have our conclusion and we're looking at science to prove it.
Yes, and that's a problem for me.
This is a problem, but even the thing is, I'm saying that the atheists are doing the same thing, or even the agnostic atheists like yourself, by going to these models. Even though the dominant models show that there is a singularity, which usually smacks of divinity, as Stephen Hawking says in his book, A Brief History of Time.
Yeah, but that's old. We've moved on from there. So you can't start quoting a 1997-98 book. We are 20 years on. Hawking and Roger Penrose have moved on. So that model is no longer valid in that way. Correct. So don't quote that anymore, because we've moved on from that. Yeah.
But the issue still arises. He still has to explicate if there's an external agency. And no one has said there is no external agency.
Nobody's proved there isn't.
Nobody proved there isn't.
Correct.
Yes. So the atheist and the theist more or less stand on the same plane.
No.
Why not? No. Why would you say that the atheist or the agnostic atheist stands on the higher plane?
No, well, I'm not saying higher plane
necessarily.
Okay, because we're not positing a supernatural agency. Even if we had no natural hypothesis for how the universe could have come to be the way it is now, that doesn't justify going, okay, well, we are now justified in a supernatural. So, and I gave you the multiverse, which is an outcome of the inflationary model. So again, I want to make sure, I'm happy to agree with you that the inflationary model by Alan Guth seems to be the best subscribed model. And I say, I'm not looking at the other two and going, hey, here's proof. I'm only presenting them. If you say it must be this or it's impossible to be that, then I will present them and go, hang on, you can't make absolute claims. I'm happy to put those aside and say to you, let's talk about inflationary model. What does that predict? It predicts a multiverse. Okay, so, and use, or the other option that Alexander Vilenkin talked about is what we talked about last time, which is the quantum vacuum, bringing a universe into existence from nothing.
Okay, I'm hoping I got you correctly. If I were to say to you, what is around that corner, your answer would not be more corner, would it? It would never be more corner.
I would say I don't know would be my answer.
But it wouldn't be more corner.
I don't know. If it was a circle, the
so
big
if
pillar
I say
would be
to you
a
what
corner,
is outside of nature, nature being a property of the universe, you can't say more nature. Did you follow through the discussion?
Why not?
Because nature is a property of the universe as we know, which is established in science. We cannot hypothetically say nature exists beyond the universe. Okay. This is a part and parcel of belief. So you cannot say nature created nature.
Okay, but I'm not using the word nature. No, only you are.
It's not. But part of the laws of physics, everything, it falls into nature and parts of the universe. the
but
properties
you
of
and
the
I
universe.
agreed that prior to, let's call it the origin of the universe, the beginning is, the reason I don't like the word beginning is because you and I have a different definition of beginning. Every beginning that I'm aware of that a cosmologist uses, none of them have got God in it. That doesn't mean they just don't take God into account. That doesn't mean they say God, it's impossible, but no cosmologist that I'm aware of goes, here's a model and the model predicts God. None, zero, none of them. So when we talk about it, we are talking about models that predict certain things based on physics, observations, mathematics, etc. If there was a model that could predict a God, and if that model said, okay, here's the certain things that need to happen, and if that was true, now we could conclude God created the universe. Now they're on the same scientific page, but we're not. You're dealing, if I may say so, in philosophy, and my side is dealing in science as far as we can go currently.
This is what I was saying, that you cannot talk about anything beyond the universe using physics, because this is not the realm of physics. The discussion that I mentioned last week was more on the theological rational concept. It was not physics, because you cannot use physics where the realm of physics does not exist.
Okay, two things.
Did you follow through that?
To a point, but physics can point us in a direction. Even if we can't use physics outside the universe, it can point us to a possible natural explanation. When I say natural, not this, as in like not a intelligent creator. It can point us in that direction.
Could you give, for example, if you were suggesting a natural cause, then it's saying that nature created nature.
No. That's why I say don't use that word.
I don't want to get lost.
Something that's not intelligent. So a non-intelligence.
So you're saying a non-intelligence created.
Remember what I'm saying? I'm saying we don't know.
You're saying
what I am saying is though that the cosmology, the physics, etc., can point us towards certain hypotheses.
Me as a believer, I'm saying I believe in certain things.
Yes.
I'm not using just science because I understand the limitations of science, and this is why I tried to discuss with you last week. If you realize that there are constraints of science, and I'll just list a few, as long as you agree with one. That's my point that's being made. For example, ethical judgment. Science has no grounds for ethical judgment. Science cannot say that this is good or this is bad. I'll give you a time to reply, okay, even if you agree with one of them. Aesthetical judgment. Science cannot say that this is good, good looking, or that is bad, or handsome or ugly. This is not a judgment that science can make. Another one is metaphysical truths, the consciousness, the mind. Science cannot explain that as far as we know as of now, and I don't think, this is my personal opinion, it can do so in the future. Science also cannot explain, for example, mathematics, because mathematics is the basis of science. If you try to prove mathematics with science, it's a circular reason. So there are many things, and these are just the sections or the categories which I mentioned that science cannot explicate. In each of these categories, there are more details. So I just put them into categories just to make it more brief. So science, your endeavor may be to explain this universe or the creation of this universe with science. But we have to realize that science has its limitations and its constraints. And this is where philosophy, where theology, where rational, where using your ration comes into play. We say we don't just, Karl Popper, he said scientism is the dogmatic view that science can reduce all things, all knowledges to that which is empirical.
Okay, so I would disagree in some points in the following sense, because I think you need to differentiate between what will happen in practice, which you kind of did, and what will happen in principle. Would you agree that in principle, everything within this universe could be explained through science? In principle. So that means consciousness, that means all the things that we don't know about inside what we would call our local universe. Do you think in principle we could explain it? If we had the right techniques, the perfect instruments?
May I have 20 seconds? Okay, from what I know, there's things which are natural which can be explicated by natural means or science or physics. There are things which are preternatural, which means at this moment, because of our limitations, it cannot be explained, but it has the possibility in the future to be explained. I believe there are some things which are outside the realm of this universe, this natural universe, which thus would make it supernatural. That science it would trespass if it tried to explicate this.
Okay, so to a degree, to me it seems like that's correct. If we use this as the universe, whatever's outside that, in principle at the moment, we're not able to. But if this thing somehow acts on the universe, we could in principle work that out. I'll give you an example, not from God. and I was just listening to it. I hope I get it right, and I apologize, Phil. I was listening. I may not get it right. The multiverse, for example. There is potential evidence that could show that there's a multiverse. Now you might go, well, how's that possible if it's, quote, outside the universe? But if it interacts with the universe in some method, then we could detect that. And if we could do observations, have mathematics, etc., that can give us a prediction, we look for it and we find it, that would constitute for cosmologists evidence that there's possibly a multiverse out there. Even if we can't see it yet, if it's interacting, bumping into our universe in some way, empirically, then we could, in principle, say there's a multiverse.
This is similar to the flat lander. I've heard Carl Sagan discuss about the flat lander. If you have someone who lives on a flat land in 2D and a three-dimensional object entered in that two-dimensional world that flat lander is living in, he would not be able to perceive that third dimensional object. I agree there may be possibilities of other dimensions.
No, not other dimensions.
I'll follow. Okay. I'll perceive there may be possibilities to perceive many things. Colors, objects, dimensions, and even multiverses, which is theoretical at the moment.
Sure.
Yeah, the mathematics indicate towards it, but there's no kind of solid information to suggest that this is true.
To Phil and the experts, there's a few things, but there's not enough to say it's strong.
Yeah, I'm not a physicist myself, so I know my shortcomings. But ultimately, what created this universe, multiverse? You still have the same problem. Well, even if you can explicate that the universe is part of a multi-universe or multiverse, you still have the issue to suggest what's beyond the boundaries of this multiverse.
Why?
Because
why would they? No, carry on.
Because this multiverse, would you suggest that is infinite or is finite? If you say it's infinite, then again it would need some kind of explanation. Did you follow?
Well, there may be an explanation.
Because we don't have this explanation. Now, what we're doing is just hypothesizing.
Correct. We're being speculation.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between the two of us.
One of the difference between the two of us is that I say something which is infinite has not been observed in the universe.
Sure, but that doesn't mean it's impossible.
That's right.
Good.
But this will be highly speculative on someone's half to say that this is the model. It has to be because you brought in.
No, but I'm not saying it has to be anything. Remember I said. Yeah, there's no has to be. There's no absolutes in my world. Yeah.
This is one of the problems of these discussions. Sometimes it goes deeper than most people can fathom or even deal with.
Sometimes even for me, but yeah.
Because we explain the way the universe, maybe is part of a multiverse, but then what is the multiverse part of? Does it have finite borders? If it does, what created that finite border or that multiverse? You still end up in the same place. I believe that this universe is indicative of intelligence. It has beauty, majesty in all of the creation, and this for me is a sign. You ask for signs like a language. I had said last week that the language of DNA, as Francis Crick titled his book, The Language of God, is a language that speaks to you as a person that God does exist. Physics is a language. Mathematics is a language where God is speaking to his creation. The creator speaks to his creation through creation. There's an argument, bring me evidence of your creator. And the person, he says, how can I bring you the evidence of my creator when the whole of creation is evidence of the creator?
Yeah, but that's begging the question, isn't it? So, because I look out at the world and I go, wow, it's an amazing world out there. Quite a bit of it we can explain naturally. Some of it we can't potentially at the moment. So I have a natural explanation, as in I go, wow, it's a teleonomic design. You go, wow, it's a teleological design. And how do we establish which of those is true? Because everything I test seems to suggest my point of view. And when you tell me, I don't see an argument from your point of view that's in any way persuasive for that.
Well, this is what I'm suggesting with you as well. Because we get to a certain stalemate because of the limitations of our knowledge in physics and astronomy and so on and so forth. What my point is that physics cannot explain everything. This has always been my contention, is that science, as I explained before, cannot explain everything. So while you're looking or endeavoring to find a natural explanation for the universe, you cannot use a natural explanation to talk about that thing which caused, or external agency which caused this universe or this multi-universe. You're simply using the wrong tools to find something that
Let's assume, I'm not 100% with you on that, but let's assume that's true. what justification have you got to say, okay, it's an intelligence? Because all you have, from my point of view, is shaky, in my view, philosophy, because we've got no science. Whereas I go, we don't know. You go, no, I'm not happy with we don't know. I want to posit a creator, and because my book says a creator, I'm going to look for reasons philosophically, because I haven't got anything else, to then justify my creator. I'm going, hang on a moment, you should use the Null Hypothesis, which is my position, which is there's no good evidence or reason. We shouldn't postulate something unless there's evidence. So first we look for the evidence. We don't go, hey, I've got an answer, now I'm going to look out there to see what matches my answer. That's seemingly more your position. Mine is, let's look out there and see if we can find the answer. It's a very different methodology.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, in the absence of total evidence, sometimes we make assumptions. For example, you don't know you're going to fall into a vacuum if you take the next step, but you have a high confidence that that won't happen and you will get to your destination. It's the same thing when the believer says he believes in God. We may not have all of the science now to make such a postulation, and this is seeded to you from the beginning. Likewise, you seeded in the beginning, it cannot be proved that God does not exist. This is where our stalemate is. I say that science has its limitations, that it cannot explicate anything beyond the universe. And the atheists will still, and today you've not taken any contention with me calling you an atheist.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, the atheist, as I mentioned in the Oxford Living Dictionary, the definition is the one who denies that there is a God. So if you make the claim that God does not exist, you equally have the onus or the burden of proof upon your shoulders to prove that God does not exist. But every atheist is aware that this is a very difficult thing to do. The problem with the singularity and the inflation model is, as was mentioned, and even up to today, this is still the dominant belief, it smacks of divinity.
Yeah, but that's just a claim, though, isn't it? We don't have evidence of that.
Yeah, this is not science. You won't have scientific evidence.
Okay, so why do you not withhold your belief and be an agnostic on what happened before the universe?
No, I have a level of agnosticism. In the places where I see it best to fill in my agnosticism, I do so, because I know that at the end of the day, it's better to do so just in case. This is, for me, this is why I say it is a belief. We have belief in things which are unseen and unknown for us as Muslims. Allah says this in the Quran, and we conceive this. The person who says we know, he's not, I don't think he's articulating himself precisely.
Good, I agree with you.
Likewise, the atheist also, I do not believe, is articulating themselves precisely. You had this militant kind of atheism that came on the rise with Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins.
Before you go there, because you've said quite a few things, we can talk about that. And I remember, speak to me, ask me my position, because it could be the Dawkins. I don't agree with everything Dawkins says, or I don't agree with what the other guy says. So I wouldn't lump everybody. I wouldn't say all you Muslims want to blow people up. I wouldn't go there. I would ask you, what's your position? Only deal with you. So you've said quite a bit there. When you use the example of put your foot down, you might go into another dimension. That, for me, is not a good analogy with saying God. Hey, we don't know that we're not going to zip into another dimension. Hey, we don't know that there's a God. There's a big difference between those two, and I don't want us to conflate them as if they're on equal footing. So your position is, because I don't know certain things, I'm somehow justified in believing something outside.
Look, I mentioned when we look around ourselves and see the intelligence in the universe, how you are created, how the trees, how the ecology is set up. And so we don't assume that these things came from nothing. As an atheist, I think it would be hard also to believe such intelligence came from nothing or non-intelligence. I would say that the language of DNA, the language of mathematics, the language you use for physics is also indications that there is a higher being who has intelligence which created you. So then I would say a God exists for this reason. Even in the Quran, Allah says, do the people not look upon themselves, how they were created? Do they not ponder? Allah says, "Inna fi khalqis samawati wal ard wa ikhtilafi wal layli wan nahar." He said, verily in the creations of the heavens and the earth and the alternations of the night and the day, therein are signs for men who understand.
Well, we are looking at it,
yeah. So when we look at this, we can see even the top guys in the Genome Project, Francis Crick, who you mentioned last week.
Not Francis Crick.
Francis Crick.
No, the DNA. Who's the DNA
Francis
guy?
Collins, sorry.
Francis Collins. Thank you. Yes.
Sorry, Francis Collins. I stand to be correct.
Yeah.
Even he comes to the conclusion after studying genes that this is a language. This is a language.
Yeah, but that's just his interpretation, because it's not actually a language.
But then
he's interpreting what he sees as something that looks like a language. And all
but
of this,
then you'd have to say where
as
this came from.
biology. So when you break it down as biology, now if you're asking me where did the original cell come from, there's a couple of theories out there. Again, we don't know that for sure.
This is the thing. All of them ultimately goes down to some kind of belief. We don't say simply that we believe. We're saying that there are indications that we believe in a God.
Yes,
I may not be able to naturally explain that using physics, because I believe physics is a tool that can only measure the natural world. Outside of the universe, I say physics has no place.
That's fine. That's your potential opinion. But
do you believe did you understand or follow? I don't mean that in any derogatory.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
The believer simply does not say, there must be a God because we're here. They look at the science of the creations, of the heavens, the earth, you as a person, the DNA, physics, mathematics, and say all of this intelligence could not have come nowhere. And the same question can be posed to you. Do you really think all of this complexity came from nothing or by chance?
Okay, so those two statements are not statements that it would not be my worldview. So I would consider them slightly like a straw man, because I don't think it's by accident or it is by chance in a sense. But the real answer is we don't know for sure. But because we don't know doesn't mean that we should posit a creator. That's the biggest leap that I think, where I see the God of the gaps. Some people look out, like you've quite rightly said, and go, hey, this looks like it's language, it's all these wonderful things. We're not going to investigate it naturally. It just looks wonderful, and we're going to say it's a God. Now, you might say that's a bit of a straw man. That's the way I interpret some people looking out at the world. Because if you weren't doing that, you go, hey, we don't know how human beings came into existence. We don't know for sure what happened at the beginning of the universe. So we'll be agnostic. But your belief system does not allow you to do that. And I think that's where we have a problem.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this before. Most of the scientists historically, Einstein, Newton, Newton, Einstein.
Yeah.
These guys didn't believe, they weren't atheists, they did believe in God. So it's not that the believer, he thinks that science has no place in the natural world. The believer does believe that science can explain the natural world, and he endeavors to explain the natural world. Even in the Islamic world, which will kind of pave the way for the information that we have in the Western world now. They all believed in God. So it's not that they believed in God and they rubbished or sidelined information. This is something you kind of alluded to in the last
Well, let me address that, because you've said two things there. One was that Newton, because Einstein was definitely not a believer.
A deist.
Not even a deist. He believed in a Spinozian type God. So I wouldn't even class that as a deist God.
Could you because when we use terms, we need to kind of, for the sake of clarity, get everyone to understand. When you say Spinoza's type of God.
So when he looked out, he went, wow, this is an amazing world. I'll call the world God. There's no intelligence. I'll just call the world, the beauty of the world, God. That was his view. Now, Isaac Newton, you're right, was a kind of a Christian. He would have been a heretical Christian today, but he also believed in alchemy and other crazy things. What it shows is that people can believe different things, so they can partition their mind. My claim, if I make a claim, is that whenever somebody studies the natural world, they're acting like an atheist scientist. They're not looking at the Quran. If they're doing science properly, they're not looking at the Quran or the Bible and going, hey, I'm going to look at this, and they're putting those aside and they're looking at the natural world. So everybody who's a scientist, who's a genuine scientist, even Francis Collins, when he's doing the genome, he's not looking and going, how do I make this work with God? He's just putting that out of the picture. So we mustn't conflate the fact that some people were theists or deists years ago with the belief that they looked at the natural world. I'm fine with the people, because that's all there was.
The God of the gaps kind of argument to suggest that believers are just filling in gaps. I explained to you, if the Ford car, if we explicate how it works, the mechanism of the Ford car, it does not do away with Henry Ford. Henry Ford still exists.
Yeah.
So we can explicate everything we want in this universe naturally using the laws of physics. It does not do away with God.
Yeah, but you shouldn't be positing that without some kind of justification. And the only thing I can see you have, in my view, and it's borrowed from other people, not you personally, but it's just generally around, is kind of a not a very strong philosophical argument. There's no science that backs it up. You and I agree that whatever the scientific points towards, it's speculative. We don't have firm conclusion. So we're both in the position, in a sense, of going, okay, we don't know what happened before the universe. But you are saying, no, I'm going to look inside the universe. I'm going to try and take a cumulative place and go, the only explanation for this, or the best explanation for this, whichever way you want to put it, is that there's some kind of intelligence. And I'm going, no.
Yeah, this is what.
Yes, I know. But that, again, if we had more information, we wouldn't be. That's my contention. Is a big God of a gaps argument, because we don't have enough information.
If you were the same thing is happening in cosmology when you say the multiverse, which you posited, even though it's theoretical. The same question gets asked: what is beyond the multi-universe or the multiverse? Yeah,
but that's a philosophical question at the moment. We don't know is the answer.
This is why I'm saying that it's infinite. Natural tools are only for the universe or within a closed system. Yeah, it's not beyond that system.
What I think it is, and I was listening to Phil talking about it. There was a mathematician who came up with it. I think we're using our intuition and our experience of this world, and we're trying to explicate it outside the universe, and that's problematic. The same with the quantum world. Nobody in this world would have gone, oh, the camera can be there and there at the same time. We've observed that can kind of happen in the quantum world, and I would caution people to go, hey, whatever happens in this world must happen outside the universe or before the universe. It could be the universe is eternal. We don't know for sure. But theists will claim, no, it can't be eternal because we've never seen that in our universe. Just because we haven't seen something in our universe doesn't mean it's not possible before or outside or whatever.
My point on that is that sometimes the confidence that atheists come with is to suggest that the universe is eternal, or was rather eternal.
But again,
and the same issue that you had with theists is the same issues that we have with.
Can you point out any atheist that says that it is eternal? All atheists that I'm aware of say that this is a model, like I've said, it's a model. It could be. We are not claiming it's probable. All we are countering is that theists who claim it's impossible. That's the only claim. So, and we had this
for the clarification of the matter, we simply do not know.
We don't know whether it's eternal or not eternal. We don't know.
And for the theist, he rather have something.
That's the problem.
Something.
That's the problem.
It may be a problem for you, but as Francis Crick he mentions, or Colin, sorry, and he says the hearts have a space which is missing for God, and I think Shabur, he spoke to you in regards to this. How do you explain this? That the hearts have an eagerness for God.
That's not true. So I've debunked that.
Could you explain just for the...
I've got it on a video. It'll be easier because I've got all the references. I will point you to it and I'll send you an email.
That'd be great.
I can go through. I've got it all here. It'll take another 10 minutes to do it. I could do it for you. I'm happy to.
I'm unaware.
The innate fitra is, in my world, completely debunked. So anybody.
So you don't believe in any innateness?
No. All that some of the studies potentially show is that young children, and they're already at an age where socialization has taken place, can believe in superhuman or supernatural things. But that's nothing like a God.
Even in atheistic societies.
So
this is what the issue that Shabu, I think, was. I only watched it for maybe 5 minutes, but I think this is what
she's only the lady that did the study only did it in a Christian country and in Japan, as far as I'm aware when I studied it. Hopefully this doesn't get too bad. Otherwise, I'm going to have to switch off the camera here. And they're both Christians. They're not atheists, as was claimed. And all we need to falsify this is a group of people who, from the moment they're born, never ever have an innate belief, and we've got that. And so, as far as I'm concerned, it's a nice thought to have, but we've got no evidence that this innate fitra is true.
It started raining heavily. Send me the link, and maybe we can continue with the discussion.
We can do it again. Yeah.
But like I said, I'm very limited with this stuff. I barely know anything. Thank you very much, Rob.
Thanks, Hamza.
Gentlemen.